She had carried it for 46 years. Not a suspicion, not a vague, uneasy feeling of the kind that people sometimes talk themselves out of. A fact. A specific, devastating fact that she had held inside her chest since the summer of 1977, when she was 22 years old and living in the same house as her brother in the San Joaquin Valley, and when she understood, not guessed, not feared, but understood what he had done. She had carried it through her own marriage, through the births of her 3 children, through her retirement from the school district where she had worked for 31 years, through the funerals of both her parents, and through 46 winters in which a family named Delgado had waited for an answer that she alone could give them. She had not given it, not until the morning of March 7, 2023, when 70-year-old Norma Jean Haas walked through the front door of the Tulare County Sheriff's Office in Visalia, California, sat down across from a deputy she had never met, and said words she had rehearsed in the dark for nearly 5 decades. "I need to tell you what my brother did, but before we get to that morning, and before we get to everything that came after it, we have to go back to the valley." In the summer of 1977, when none of this had a name yet. The San Joaquin Valley in July runs hot in a way that feels personal. The heat comes off the flat farmland in visible waves, and the smell of the valley in summer is a specific thing. Irrigation water on dry soil, the sweetness of ripening stone fruit from the orchards along the highway, diesel from the farm equipment that moves through the fields from before dawn. The towns along Highway 99 in the mid-1970s were communities that ran on agricultural work and family loyalty, and the kind of trust that comes from knowing every face at the grocery store. Earlimart, Pixley, Tipton. Places where the high school football schedule was front-page news, and where a CB radio crackled on the kitchen counter of half the households, because that was how people stayed connected when they were out on the roads. Daniel Delgado was 24 years old in the summer of 1977, and he was the kind of young man those communities produced with a particular kind of pride. He had grown up in Earlimart, the second of 4 children, and he had stayed when a lot of his friends had left for Fresno or Bakersfield or further. His father, Ruben Delgado, ran a small engine repair shop on the south end of town, and Daniel had worked there since he was old enough to hold a wrench. By 1977, he had been doing it full-time for 3 years, and he was good at it, patient and precise in the way of people who understand that the difference between a machine working and a machine failing is often a single small thing done right or done wrong. He was also, by every account in the community, a deeply decent person. His mother, Esperanza Delgado, described him in the years after his death as a young man who brought her coffee every morning without being asked, who coached the younger boys at the parish on Saturday afternoons, who saved money in a tin box under his bed for a truck he wanted to buy by the end of the year. He had a particular laugh that people remembered specifically. Loud and sudden, the kind that startled you into laughing too. He had never been in serious trouble. He had never had an enemy that anyone could name. On July 19, 1977, Daniel Delgado drove his father's pickup truck to a 4th of July fireworks sale at the edge of town to buy sparklers for his niece's birthday party the following weekend. He told his mother he would be back by noon. He left at 10:30 in the morning. The truck was found 3 days later, parked on a dirt service road off Avenue 56, 2 miles from the fireworks stand, with the engine cold and the door unlocked and the bag of sparklers still sitting on the passenger seat. Daniel was not found with the truck. He was not anywhere. The Tulare County Sheriff's Department opened a missing persons investigation within 48 hours. The lead deputy, a man named Frank Ordway, who had been with the department for 9 years, and who took the case with the kind of quiet seriousness that comes from knowing a family personally, began working from the last confirmed sighting. A teenager at the fireworks stand remembered Daniel. He had come in, paid cash for the sparklers, exchanged a few words, and walked back to his truck. That was the last documented moment anyone outside his family would ever see him alive. Ordway interviewed 41 people over the following 6 weeks. He spoke to former classmates. He spoke to the families along the service road. He looked into a land dispute between Ruben Delgado's shop and a neighboring property that had turned briefly acrimonious the prior year. He looked at a man from Pixley who had a history of violence and whose alibi was thin and unverified, and he pursued that lead for 3 weeks before it collapsed under the weight of contradictory evidence. He requested assistance from the county, and the county sent 1 additional investigator for 2 weeks, and between them they could not find what had happened on the service road between the fireworks stand and the Delgado home. In December of 1977, Daniel's remains were found by a farm worker in a dry irrigation canal 6 miles from where his truck had been parked. The medical examiner confirmed that Daniel had been killed. The specific manner was documented and withheld from the family, who were already broken by 5 months of not knowing. Esperanza Delgado, 61 years old by then, kept the porch light on every night for 2 more years before her children finally and gently asked her to stop. The investigation continued in a formal sense. Ordway's files documented follow-up calls and re-interviews through 1979. By 1981, the case was effectively cold. The file was thick, 41 interviews, 7 documented leads, 2 persons of interest cleared, 1 persistent lead that had never fully resolved, but it contained no name, no charge, no answer. Ruben Delgado died in 1989, 12 years after his son, and people at the funeral quietly agreed that he had never fully come back from it. Esperanza died in 1994. She had kept Daniel's photograph on the mantel in the living room, next to the photograph of his confirmation, and every year on July 19th, she had lit a candle and placed it on the kitchen table and sat with it until it burned down. She never stopped doing it. The candle on the mantel was the last thing she asked her daughter Maria to remember. Maria Delgado Vizquez, Daniel's younger sister, was 40 years old when her mother died. She had married, had 2 children of her own, and had moved to Tulare, 20 minutes from Erlemart, and she carried the anniversary of July 19th, the way her mother had, quietly, with a candle, with the particular grief of something unfinished that cannot be forced to finish. She had a photograph of Daniel on her own mantel now. She had never stopped asking the sheriff's department, never loudly, but always steadily, whether anything was new. By 2010, 33 years had passed. The service road off Avenue 56 had been repaved. The fireworks stand was long gone. The engine repair shop had been sold after Ruben died and converted into a tire shop, and then into a building that stood empty for years, with a sun-bleached for lease sign in the window. The people who remembered Daniel Delgado really remembered him. The laugh and the coffee and the tin box under the bed were in their 70s now, or gone. Maria Vizquez put a new photograph of Daniel on her mantel when her old one faded. She lit the candle on July 19, 2010, then again in 2011, then 2012, then 2020, then 2022. Every case on this channel represents weeks of research, verifying facts, and piecing together real lives that deserved better. If you want us to keep uncovering the truth behind stories like this one, take a second to like and subscribe. Drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Your support is what makes this possible. Now, let's get back to Daniel. The thing about guilt is that it does not weaken with time. That is the common belief, that it fades, that the mind eventually builds walls around the unbearable parts of its own history and the walls hold. But the research does not support it, and the experience of the people who carry it does not support it. What guilt does, over decades, is change shape. It becomes structural. It becomes part of the way a person moves through a day, the way they sleep, the specific things they cannot watch on television, the conversations they redirect, the rooms they leave when certain topics come up. It becomes as much a part of a person as anything they were born with. Norma Jean Haas had been born Norma Jean Calder. She was the younger sister of Thomas Calder, who had been 27 years old in the summer of 1977, and who had been living in the same house as Norma Jean and their mother, Dorothy, in a rental property on the east side of Earlimart, 6 blocks from the Delgado family. Thomas Calder worked on and off in agricultural equipment contracting, seasonal work that paid well enough and ended every year in the fall, and he and Daniel Delgado had known each other, the way everyone in Earlimart knew each other, without being close friends. Norma Jean did not know, on the morning of July 19, 1977, that her brother had left the house before dawn with the truck he borrowed from a man whose name she never knew, and that he had come back before noon and gone directly to his room, and that he had not spoken to her or their mother at dinner that night. She did not know that when Daniel's name began appearing in the local paper and in the conversations at the grocery store and in the door-to-door canvass that Deputy Ordway's team ran through that neighborhood in late July, her brother's manner changed in a way she could not name at the time, but would spend decades naming to herself in the dark. She knew what she knew by September of 1977. The how of it is hers, and it will not be detailed here. What matters is this: she knew. She was 22 years old, living in her mother's house, financially dependent on a family structure that included her brother, and she was afraid. Court documents and the statements she would later give to investigators make clear that the fear was not abstract. It was specific. She had good reason for it. She did not go to the police in September of 1977, and she did not go in October, and she did not go when Ordway knocked on the door of their house as part of the neighborhood canvass and spoke to Dorothy Calder for 14 minutes while Norma Jean sat in the back bedroom with her hands in her lap. Thomas Calder moved to Stockton in 1979. He married in 1983. He had no children. He was, by the accounts of people who knew him in Stockton, a quiet and unremarkable man who kept to himself and paid his bills on time and attended a neighborhood church somewhat irregularly. He died of cardiac failure in February of 2021 at the age of 71 and was buried in San Joaquin County. He had never been interviewed in connection with Daniel Delgado's death. He had never been, so far as the records show, on Deputy Ordway's list of persons of interest at all. Norma Jean had not spoken to her brother in the last 11 years of his life. The estrangement had been gradual and then permanent, accomplished without confrontation, sustained by geography and silence. When he died, she did not attend the burial. She sent a card to the funeral home. She did not write anything in it. 2 years after Thomas Calder died, Norma Jean Haas, retired, 70 years old, living in Visalia with a spare bedroom that her grandchildren used in the summers, began to find that the shape of the guilt had changed again. Thomas's death had not brought relief. She had, in some quiet and unacknowledged part of herself, expected that his death would close something. It did not. What it did was remove the last reason she had been able to offer herself for staying quiet, and without that reason, the weight of what she had been carrying had no more architecture to hide inside. She spoke to her pastor first, in late 2022. Then she spoke to a lawyer. Then, On the morning of March 7, 2023, she drove herself to the Tulare County Sheriff's Office in Visalia, parked her car in the visitor lot, sat in it for 11 minutes, and went inside. The deputy who received her initial statement was 34-year-old investigator Rosa Medina, who had been with the cold case unit for 3 years. Medina would later describe the conversation in statements to the Tulare County District Attorney's Office as one of the most methodical witness disclosures she had encountered. Not emotional in the way of a person who has been waiting to confess, but careful, precise, organized in the way of a person who had rehearsed every word for a very long time. Norma Jean had brought a written timeline. She had brought dates. She had brought the name of one person who could corroborate a single specific detail she had never told anyone. She had brought everything she had been holding for 46 years, and she laid it on the table in a small interview room in Visalia, California, and she did not leave anything out. The investigation was reopened immediately. Investigator Medina coordinated with the Tulare County DA's office and the sheriff's cold case unit to cross-reference everything in Norma Jean's account against the original 1977 case file, which had been preserved in county archives. The corroboration was specific and significant. Norma Jean described details of the service road off Avenue 56 that had not been publicly reported in 1977, details that were in the archived case file and had not been released. She described something Thomas had said to her, a specific phrase, that aligned with a note in Frank Ordway's original interview logs from a different neighbor. A connection no one had made, and no one could have made, without both pieces of information in the same room at the same time. The Tulare County Sheriff's Office issued a formal statement in September of 2023. Thomas Lee Calder was named as the individual responsible for the death of Daniel Delgado on July 19, 1977. Thomas Calder had died in 2021. There would be no arrest, no trial. The law had no mechanism to do to a dead man what justice demands. But the Tulare County District Attorney's Office formally closed the case with a finding of cause, and the Delgado family, what remained of it, was told the name of the man who had taken Daniel from them 46 years before. Maria Vasquez was 69 years old when investigator Medina called her. She was in her kitchen. The photograph of Daniel was on the mantel in the next room. Records show she did not speak for a long time after she was given the name. Then she said, "Did he know what he did to us?" The investigator did not have an answer for that. Nobody did. Norma Jean Haas gave a statement to the press through her attorney. She did not appear publicly. The statement said only that she was sorry it had taken so long, and that she hoped the family could find what she understood she could not give back to them. Maria Vasquez, asked by a local reporter whether she had anything to say about the woman who had come forward, was quiet for a moment. Then she said she carried something terrible for a very long time. "I don't know how to feel about that yet. Maybe I don't need to. There is a particular kind of courage that does not look like courage when it happens, that looks instead like a 70-year-old woman parking her car in a visitor lot and sitting in it for 11 minutes before she can make herself move." Norma Jean Haas was 22 years old when she made the first of a long sequence of choices that compounded into 4 decades of silence, and she was 70 when she made the choice that ended them. Both of those facts are true at the same time, and neither one cancels the other, and the family that waited 46 years for an answer is left to decide what to do with the truth now that they have it. Daniel Delgado was 24 years old. He bought sparklers for his niece's birthday party and drove down a road he had driven 100 times and did not come home. He had a laugh that startled people into laughing with him. He brought his mother coffee without being asked. He kept money in a tin box under his bed for a truck he was going to buy by the end of the year. He was the kind of person a community builds itself on, the kind whose absence leaves a specific shape in every place they should have been. His mother kept the porch light on for 2 years. His father never fully came back. His sister lit a candle every July 19th for 30 years, and the candle is still lit, and the name on the mantle is still his. He was not forgotten. He was never forgotten. And the truth, though it came 46 years late, and through a door he could not have imagined, came. There are a few things worth sitting with after a story like this. Norma Jean Haas was both a victim of her circumstances and a person who made choices that prolonged the Delgado family's suffering for decades. And both things are fully true. How do you hold those two things at the same time? And what does it say about fear, and about silence, and about the way secrets calcify inside a person over a lifetime? That it took Thomas Calder's death to finally free the truth he had put inside his sister. And for the family, when justice cannot reach the person responsible, because time already has, is what remains still justice? Or is it something else, something smaller and more complicated that we don't quite have the right word for? Justice found Daniel Delgado after 46 years. Stories like his are why this channel exists. If you believe truth is worth pursuing no matter how long it takes, subscribe. More cases are waiting in the description below. Thank you for being here.